This is Pace the Nation.
When you climb up that hill, well, eventually you'll come down. Got the winds at your back, you never wear a frown. You're waiting on that second wind to begin to kick in.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Pace the Nation, broadcasting back here at Studio 1A in downtown Arlington, Virginia. We are back again in Clarendon, of course, for episode number 272. And alongside me, and I'm not even going to mention why she's away back in West Arlington, my wife, co-host Julie Culley. Julie, what's up?
Hey, we discussed this last time because every time I come in the studio, I end up sitting right next to you and sharing a screen.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I've promised. I've underdelivered. I'd overpromised. You'll be in studio sometime soon. The fact of the matter is, Julie, both of us are sick. Well, I'm sick. The family's sick. You don't need to be around me anyway. So we're quarantined in separate spots.
I'm glad you called out your raspy voice from the get-go.
Yeah, right. So that's what's, so I apologize from the onset that the voice is a little banged up. It wasn't a late night at the bar. It's just something's going around.
That would be a better story. Oh, you love talking about that. Something's going around.
I can't stand that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we got a big show. Good to see you. Glad to be back. You are back in town from a couple trips that I want to get to. The Boston Marathon being one of them. Mm-hmm. And let's start there. I'm really excited to have a guest who ran the Boston Marathon. We'll get to him in a moment, but you were at the Boston Marathon and you were on a super inspiring podcast. Tell us about that show. We got to get Dana on as a guest on Pace the Nation as well.
Well, Brooks hosted a bunch of live conversations at the Hyperion House. We called it the Hyperion House or the Hype House 2.0. Mm-hmm. The first one was in Atlanta in 2020. Yes. But we rented a brownstone on Newbury Street and had decked the whole place out. It was gorgeous and had some really inspiring and incredible conversations the entire weekend. Mine just being one of many, but Dana Giordano interviewed me. She has a podcast, and I think it's called More Than Running. Is that what it's called? More Than Running podcast.
It is. Yep.
And she's part of the Citius Mag family, and just an awesome conversation. She is really good. She's a really good interviewer. Really made me feel comfortable up there, and we had a really cool conversation. But there were a lot of inspiring things that happened in Boston that weekend. So. It's just one of those times where everything kind of comes together and there's incredible people and incredible moments. And
for the audience, if you're running, you know it. If you run it, you know it. Even if you're not running, if you're spectating, if you're there to run the 5K, if you're there just to soak in all the events, it's an inspiring weekend. And Brooks really did it well. And we will tweet out that episode of the podcast so our listeners can hear you, not as the interviewer, but as the interviewee. Because you were a great interviewee. You told a great, inspiring story. Great storyteller you are, Julie.
Oh, wow. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, and Dana did
I guess that's why you hired me for Pace the Nation.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why I make the big bucks around here.
Or maybe because Docs and Joanna quit. Now,
you were all that was left.
Yeah, you know what? Speaking of Docs and Joanna, the last time our guest was on, because we've had our guest on, Docs and Joanna were part of the show. Today, I'm really excited to have Tom Foreman on the show. He was way back in 2016. He was on the show. Episode 57, Tom Foreman was on the show. He's a CNN reporter. He's an author. He was at the time, I remember, again, episode 57, as we hear at episode 272, 200 plus episodes later. People said Tom was your best guest ever. No pressure, Tom. You got to deliver on
round two.
On round two. But he was an awesome guest, and we talked about his book at the time. So we want to talk a little bit about that. But he, like you, Julie, was at the Boston Marathon. So we'll talk to Tom about his experience there running the Boston Marathon and a lot more. So author, CNN correspondent, Tom Foreman joins us next here on Pace the Nation.
Pace the Nation is brought to you by Pacers Running Stores. Pacers has 6 stores in Northern Virginia and DC. For the best running footwear, apparel, and gear, just stop by or schedule a virtual fitting with the best running experts in the business. Pacers Running exists to help as many people as possible through running. For every run, it's Pacers Running.
All right, welcome back to the program. And now, Julie, we are excited to be joined by CNN correspondent, author, and runner, ultramarathon runner, Tom Foreman. Tom, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
We are doing great, man. Thank you so much for joining us. Are you joining us from Bethesda, your home studio?
No, I'm at CNN right now, down a couple blocks from the Capitol. Yeah, and I'm excited to be with you. Thank you for inviting me back.
Well, thank you so much. I just said, as before you joined us, you were back in 2016, June 4th, you were on our show. It was a little bit different iteration of our show. We had a couple of different hosts, and you came to our studio at the time, and it was a great show. We went from topic to topic to different topics, and then you said, what are we talking about here? The circus? And that's what we ended up naming the episode. You probably don't remember, but do you remember being on that?
We talked about food. We talked about cooking to some degree. I can't remember what we cooked, but we talked about cooking.
We did. But we did talk about running as well, and that's what we wanted to have.
Running while cooking.
Yeah.
Very talented.
And we did want to have you on to talk about running. At the time we talked about your book. The book is out there. It's My Year Running Dangerously by Tom Foreman. You can get it wherever books are sold. How has it been 6 years? We checked in with the book then. Book sales brisk.
Yeah, they've been fine. No, they've done really well, and I still get social media and emails, and every now and then actual physical letters from people.
Wow.
That just come out of nowhere. And that honestly, that is by far the most gratifying part of the whole thing. Just hearing from people out there, runners of all different stripes, sometimes non-runners, but mainly runners from all over, saying, hey, this made a difference to me, or I laughed, or I felt inspired, or I listened to it while running a marathon. Those always kind of drive me wild when I hear those. The best part, this book came out in Chinese, too. I've never heard anything from China about it. Yeah, and the title in Chinese is Run Big Uncle.
Run Big Uncle. Okay. Did you choose that? You didn't have a choice in that?
Yeah. No, I got a copy of the book. I had a copy of it, and I have a colleague who speaks Chinese, and I said, what does this say? Because I knew it didn't say what I thought it said. Right. And she said, oh, it says Run Big Uncle.
Oh.
So there are some people in the Montgomery County Roadrunners Club who call me Big Uncle. When we're running races, I go, hey, Big Uncle.
Big Uncle.
All right, so laugh about that. Yeah.
Glad to have Big Uncle on the show.
Big Uncle. I'm looking forward to, there's going to be a big tour of China at some point. I just know it.
So, Tom, remind our audience about the book, why you wrote the book, because you were a runner. You ran a marathon when you were in your 20s and then decided to run another marathon. Because why?
Well, I did 4 marathons in my 20s, and then in my 50s, my older daughter was in college and said, could you help me train for my first marathon? And I really thought marathoning was behind me. But your kids ask you for things, you do things that you otherwise wouldn't do. So we trained, and I had a good time. And frankly, because I was a natural runner when I was younger, I'd never really trained. I just kind of piddled at it and then ran. So I figured in my 50s, I could no longer do that. So for the first time in my life, I actually trained for running and found it to be a really enjoyable experience. And that turned into this year. I had no idea I was going to write a book about it. I was just having a good time, in which I ran, I think it was 4 half marathons, 3 full marathons, and my first 55-mile ultramarathon, which I'd never heard of before that point. And then to promote the book moving forward, when I finished this, it just seemed like such an interesting single year to go from nothing, almost nothing, to doing all of that in 1 year. To promote the book, at one point, I did the Chicago Marathon. Then 2 weeks later, I did 5 marathons in 5 days. Wow. One of which was the Marine Corps Marathon. Then 2 days after that, I did the New York City Marathon. And then 2 weeks after that, I did the Stone Mill 50 miler again. And that was a really interesting experiment because I had never really reached that kind of Mike Wardian level of running. and it was really quite an experience and a lot of fun and a tremendous learning process. Because when I started the New York City Marathon, Ronnie, the one who's featured in the book, ran that with me that year. And when I started New York City, I was 9 miles in, I felt like you typically would feel at 22 or 23 miles.
Right.
So
right.
Anyway, it was good fun.
That's not good.
When you say quite the experience, is that because now when you reflect on it, you can't remember how hard it was and you can't remember how like how the body actually felt? I feel like a lot of times we go through that experience and then we, a few years later look back and say, it wasn't that bad. What was that experience like?
Well, I don't know if it was that bad. Ultra running is just a different thing for most of us. It's more about reaching this stasis where forward movement is a normal part of what you're doing.
Okay.
And you're thinking about everything else and doing everything else, and you're just moving a lot. Now, I will say, on the third of the 5 marathons in a row, after the third one, my wife said to me that the next morning I was just really moving slowly and having a hard time getting going. And she said, I think you're not eating enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh no, I'm doing fine. She said, well, why don't we were on the road because we were sort of doing these runs as a series of runs up to New York for the New York City Marathon and a presentation there at the marathon. And I said, well, all right. And she said, look, there's an IHOP. Let's pull in. And she's like, what do you want? I said, I don't know if I want anything. And then I proceeded to eat everything on the table. Suddenly I became aware of this. Oh no,
you need more calories.
Really hungry. And it made a huge difference. I kind of bounced back. But I don't know that it's something I would necessarily do again, in large part because it just took a lot of time.
Yeah. Right.
And I don't know if I have the juice for that either, but you never know. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, the book again is My Year Running Dangerously. Chris, put a picture of that up when you do the edit for me. My Year Running Dangerously by Tom Foreman. Get it wherever books are sold. Maybe that's not in you, but you are still at it and you're still running. Do you regret that you didn't run marathons throughout your 30s and 40s now that you've got the bug again?
No, I don't. I mean, I would it would be fun to be able to say I had that continuum in my life.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But, long distance running means trade outs.
Yeah.
And I would not have traded the other things I've done. The professional experiences I've had, more importantly, the family experiences I have. Whenever I speak to marathoning groups, particularly beginners or people who think they might want to marathon, I often say to them, look at your life. Ask yourself what else you care about. And really, if you have young children, ask about it.
Man, you are speaking to me right now, Tom. We got 3 young kids, 5, 3, and 8 months.
And I give him a hard time all the time.
Yeah.
Well, they're and look, I don't think anybody's ever loved their children more than we loved ours, but children take time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They take a lot of time, and they need time when they need it, not always when you want them to have it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that makes running schedules really hard. So while I kept a little bit of running going over all those years, a little bit, and again, I was a natural runner, so it wasn't that hard to do a little bit. I was kind of happy I did it the way I did, and to come back to it also made it incredibly fresh and new, and to explore new things. So what I've been doing more so since the book came out and after a bunch of crazy running, I really a few years back sort of got refocused on the idea of, well, could I actually be fast? Because I always thought I just had a lot of endurance, but that I wasn't fast. But you have to bear in mind, when I was running those first marathons, the science of being fast was not widely known.
Way different.
Right.
Yeah.
We had no idea.
True.
And for casual runners, I didn't have a clue.
Right.
So a few years ago, I started focusing on the idea of what does it mean to be fast and how do you get to be fast?
Mm-hmm.
And like a lot of people, I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting to qualify for Boston?
Mm-hmm.
Because that, if you're not going to be an Olympian, which most of us aren't, that's about as close as you get, right? The closer you get, if you get into Boston, you feel like, hey, this is as close as I'll ever get to the Olympics. Mm-hmm. And it's a great and wonderful feeling to say that you did that and that it worked for you, you know? So that's why I sort of started refocusing on that and doing all sorts of things I'd never done before, like speed work and attacking hills, not just for endurance, but for the force multiplier that they are. And I really adopted this, slowly moved into this mantra that every mile has a purpose.
Wow.
And you need to run as if every mile has a purpose. And that really includes the days you don't run, which the older you get become more important, and the times when you run easy. And I have become a giant believer in the idea that you truly have to have at least 2 speeds, and you have to be able to feel them. And most people don't. As you know the mantra, I'm sure you've talked about it. Most people run their slow runs too fast, which means they run their fast runs too slow.
Right.
So I've really worked on saying,
He is speaking to me. This is good, Tom. This is something I need to hear. So thank you.
Well, let me tell you something. I'll tell you something. I'm jumping all around, but this will probably speak to you. At a qualifying race for Boston in Erie, the Erie Marathon out on Prescott Isle up there.
Yep.
It's a 2-lap race, beautiful little course, nicely run. A lot of people trying to get late qualifications there, late BQs.
Yep.
I said, I'm going to fall in behind the pace group that will bring me in 10 minutes under my qualifier. And I'm going to do that because then I just don't have to do math.
Yeah.
Right. I don't, that
someone else is thinking for you.
Right. You're not constantly doing this whole thing. And I had really embraced the no watch me movement. The idea of saying, don't look at your watch all the time. Run the best race you can and don't be a slave to your watch. And in fact, the first time I qualified up in Marquette, Michigan, I looked at my watch at the beginning in the first few miles just to make sure I wasn't crazy. You know, sometimes you're way over running or way under running and you just can't feel it that day. I looked a couple times in the first few miles. I then did not look at my watch again until mile 23.
Wow. Because
my belief was I'm either in at that point or I'm not.
Right.
And if you see that and you're 10 miles away, if you're like at mile 16 and you do that, if you're behind, you are not going to make it up. There's a reason you're behind. And if you're way over, you run the terrible risk of then saying, oh, I'm way over, I should pull way back.
Right.
And you might slide right back past the other way.
That's good.
Don't look at the watch.
I'm with you because mile 16, emotionally, if you know you're not there, that's a long last 10 miles. Wow.
Oh my gosh. Well, and then that takes me back to the run at Erie. What happened at Erie, we did the first lap. First lap was grand, having a great time, cruising along. And I found myself as we started the second lap, second half, inadvertently drifting in front of the pace group. And it kept happening. And I kept opening a bigger gap. And then I said, oh, well, I'm feeling great. I should go. And being guys, like 8 other guys followed me, which is, believe me, don't follow me. Right? But they all drifted out with me too. And the gap got bigger and bigger. And then after 3 miles, I had a moment of clarity. And I said, what are you doing?
Wow. Yeah.
You had a plan for this race.
Right.
And you have 10 miles to go. Just what you just said, Chris. 10 miles to go.
Yep.
And I stepped off the course. I went to a portalet and I stood on the side of the course and waited for the pace group to catch up.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Because I thought I need discipline more than I need effort right now.
Yeah, you had to check yourself emotionally at that point because you were getting excited.
You're totally right, Julie. And I fell in with these people again and ran. We caught every single one of the other guys who went. We caught all of them.
Those 8 guys who followed you, you caught them all. Yeah.
Right. And then when we hit the last 2 miles, maybe 3 or 2 miles, I can't remember. Then I cut loose. Wow. And I flew and I picked up like an extra couple of minutes in the last few miles.
Wow.
Finished way in front of the pace group. Super happy about it. And had a really good, like a BQ of more than 12 minutes or something like that. And that, boy, that was a really great experience. But all of that has been great because it's made me enjoy the fact that at a point in my life when I can probably, I guess, enjoy the last few fast years I'm going to have. I guess. I don't know.
Well, you're a student of the sport, Tom, and that's really significant. I mean, I think that's where people make huge gains is understanding
Yeah.
the speed part of it,
Oh, yeah.
understanding how to discipline yourself. Do you train with anyone when you go out and do some of these interval workouts?
Well, once in a blue moon, I'll run with people. I usually run alone just because my schedule is so squirrely that the extra time it would take to connect with people,
Yeah.
it's complicated. The biggest, I mean, I will run with the Montgomery County Roadrunners Club, a great club, great
Yeah,
people.
absolutely.
I just got to have friends there. And when my wife has been in training programs, I have gone with her like on Saturdays or Sundays when they have training, and I will just run by myself. But invariably, that means I run into other club members, and I'll run with them for a while, and we'll chat. You know, Barry Hauptman, that whole bunch of good folks. So and it's
Awesome.
nice. I think I would be. I will say this, Julie. I think I would be faster if I trained more with other people who drove me a little bit more.
Yeah.
But that's a little hard to do. The biggest thing I miss about speed training, or now that I do more, focusing on speed, is I really get a lot less time on the trails.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
And when you're
yeah.
training for road races, when you're trying to do a really good road race, trails I think make you stronger in a lot of ways, but they're not
They
really the
do.
best for that because they're so uneven and so different. And at my age, injuries, well, not just my age, you're over 40. You're over 40. Injuries hang around longer.
Yeah, they do.
And I really don't want to catch a root, catch a rock, go down and have some injury that hangs with me for a month and a half and wipes out my training.
Yeah, the soft surface certainly saves the body, but if it's a trail that's a little bit more rugged, you're putting yourself at risk.
Yeah, if I want a soft surface, I can run the canal path over
Right.
here, which I do a lot, and that's relatively soft depending on how dry things are.
Well, it sounds like there
Well, you could-
is a next chapter for you because you have the opportunity still to maybe train with people if it does at some point fit in your life. You said speed might be, you may only have a few more years of that, but I don't know. I think the opportunity to train with people is,
I don't
could
know.
change that.
Maybe that's right. And speed, I don't know. I mean, you look at Gene Dykes. You know,
Mhm.
what is Gene now? He's over 70 now, and he's
Yeah.
still right at the edge of a 3-hour marathon.
It's
It's
crazy.
incredible.
That's
incredible.
great. That's fantastic. So
Well, Tom does a lot of he posts a lot of awesome running content. More running content, I think, than your work content. It's Tom Foreman CNN. Great trail runs both on Twitter and Instagram. And Julie, I know you wanted to touch base with him about Boston. You were there, and Tom was there too.
Yeah, Tom, tell me about your experience this year. I was up
man.
there. I mean, I was there. I work for Brooks. I was there on behalf of Brooks. It was just incredible. I mean, I know that Boston happened, oddly this past fall, but this really felt like homecoming for Boston. What was that experience like for you?
Well, you nailed it there. That was great. Plus, the super joy of getting to run it twice in such a short frame of time.
Right. Yeah.
And the weather was really very similar, wasn't it? It was a little warmer in the fall.
Right.
But it was just what a beautiful, beautiful race. And I met some of your Brooks people up there.
Did you?
Yeah. Who's your speed team people? I can't remember who they are.
Oh,
guys
our blue line
The
team?
brothers. You have some brothers who are leading.
Oh, Hanson brothers.
Oh, the
Hansons.
Hansons.
Yes,
Yeah.
I met one of them. I was at dinner with. I had this great experience. Howie Kofleski, who is.
Oh, Howie. Were you
Meb's-
part of his birthday celebration?
Yeah, it was great. So Catherine Switzer was there, and Dave McGilvery
Yep.
came by, and Meb was there, and a bunch of their great young runners, and we had this great visit, and we were chatting. In fact, Meb and I, and which one of the brothers was there?
Kevin.
It was Kevin. Yeah.
Was it Kevin? He was. We
Yeah.
were all. The three of us were sitting over there having this big discussion about speed and running as an older person.
Okay.
Which-
this is
which
where
not-
we are. This is our topic.
Which is not to give away secrets, but something that I really have been considering. I've been working. I've got about 25,000 words on a follow-up book
Okay.
to
All
the
right.
first book, and I don't know where I'll be in finishing it, but it's been about the notion of trying to get fast.
I feel like there's a big announcement coming on this show. Wow.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's about the idea of trying to get fast.
Yeah.
But I've also been talking to people, and the conversation that Kevin and Meb and I were having is about this other project, which I've been talking about, which is, should I write something about older running?
Yeah,
Because there's almost nothing about it.
it's true. Yeah.
The problem, you know what all of us are doing, and you guys are younger than me, but all of us end up looking at training plans that are put together for 30-year-olds
Yep.
and trying to do math in our head and say, well, maybe I don't have to do this one, or maybe I
Right.
should skip that one. But here's a really simple question. When you are 30 years old, 35, 25, good standard, just to begin with, is if you're going to marathon, you should be doing 40 miles a week.
hmm
Yep.
What if you're 55?
Right.
Right. How does it
Still
scale?
40 miles?
Yeah.
More? Less? Nobody knows.
Right.
Because we don't know how much the wear and tear, how much your body can take, how much recovery you need. So I really have thought it would be worth talking to some people and putting together a fun and interesting book about this question, just because there is so little worthwhile information about it. And I think what has happened is we as a country, so many of us have grown up in this sport now,
Right.
that there are a whole lot of people who previously, a generation ago would have said, well, I'm 40 now, time to
Right.
give up that racing.
Yeah.
Right.
And now I think many of us are saying, I would like to keep doing this.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I would like to be able to do this when I'm 50, when I'm 60, when I'm 70. How do I do that?
Or even
this?
start doing it. We have so
Yeah,
many
right.
people who are coming into it for the first time because maybe they, are just at a place in their life where they have, they need something. They want to get outside, they want to exercise, and they see these races with people up into their 90s completing them.
Yeah.
So people are inspired, and I
Yeah.
think you're hitting the nail on the head there. There is nothing that exists right now that really gets people started, that coaches
Yeah.
people at later ages.
Which is a long way of saying Boston was great.
Yeah. You're like, I got validation for
No,
this
Boston
book
was
that I
wonderful.
want to continue to
So
write. Yeah.
I got to ask you, and Julie does work closely with Kevin Hansen and Meb's brother, Howie.
Howie.
Yeah.
Yep. And then you saw Meb actually at the finish line.
Yeah, which was super great. I was having a decent run. It wasn't a great run. I had kind of hoped to grab a BQ at Boston, which would have been fun. And it wasn't, I didn't have a great training cycle this time. And, you learn to take that. Sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not.
Yep.
This just wasn't a great cycle. I didn't have any injuries, but I just didn't have a lot of mojo going. But it was a beautiful morning. I went out and had my wife did, oh my God, my wife Linda did a beautiful weather read, because we've been talking about weather forever, and it was almost perfect, right? But she went out that morning and she said, okay, put on this and this, drop this at the start, you'll be fine in this.
Wow.
Which you kind of know anyway, but it's nice sometimes when you're wrestling with the last minute.
Yep.
And her timing was spot on. The temperature hit just the right point when I started. Had a wonderful, wonderful run. I just had so much fun, and it was beautiful. And I managed to, I typically, when a race is done, I typically go back and I will chart out the flow of the race.
Wow.
And this was Boston 2021. Of course, way too fat on the miles at the end, right?
So for the audience who is listening via audio, he's got a graph, and you can see that on the video.
Just a bar
very
graph,
cool.
Yeah, but I do that all the time after races so that I can really see what actually happened versus what I think happened. I haven't done that for this Boston yet. I think I'm going to find that I did not run negative splits, but the difference between my splits was not as bad as it was in 2021. It was a little closer to level. And I did, you can't bank time, but you can bank energy. And I really brought energy in the last few miles and was flying. I can't imagine how many people I passed in the last mile and a half, because people are just kind of, they're choked. And I was just going and flying. And so I came across the line, and I'd already seen Meb a couple of times that weekend. We were having this great visit. He's just a wonderful person, and we have a lot of fun. And I crossed the line, and Meb was standing at the finish line. I mean, this is where he won a few years ago. And, and I pass, and I'm standing right next to him, and I go, Meb, what are you doing here? Meb was standing there to give an award to the brother of Martin Richard, who is the 8-year-old boy who was killed in the Boston bombing. His brother was running the marathon.
I heard
So-
that story. Wow.
Yeah,
Yes.
it was great. So I crossed the line. I'm like, what are you doing? He said, I'm here to give an award to Martin's brother, because Meb has done a lot with his family to help, promote the charity work and everything else going on with this. And Meb says to me, he says, are you okay? So can you hang out here? I'd like you to meet everyone. And I'm sure. So, I mean, I just crossed the line.
That's awesome.
And I'm standing there, and then he turns to one of the guys who helps him out there, John, a wonderful guy, and he says, John, do you have a medal? Because you have to walk, 30, 40 feet after every race, you get your medal. And John goes, yeah. And all of a sudden, Meb pulled out the medal, and on the finish line, he gives me my medal.
You're kidding.
And I'm like,
that's awesome.
Oh,
this guy won the
Yeah.
marathon a few years back.
Aw,
Yeah,
so
I mean,
cool.
the only guy who's ever won Boston, won New York, and an Olympic medal in the marathon.
Yep.
And it was just, it was great. And so
Great
we stood
moment.
around there, visited, and I met Martin's family briefly, and then they had to go off and do things. And Meb and I said, we'll check in with each other later, and we have. And
That's awesome.
it was that's a pretty great way. I don't think
That
my
is-
Boston finish is ever going to be better than that, unless I win next year, which
Right.
maybe, you never know.
All right, we're with Tom Foreman. Tom Foreman CNN. Give him a follow on Twitter, Instagram, social media. Then you ran Big Sur 6 days later.
Mhm,
Man,
mhm.
what was that all about?
Oh, that's my older Ronnie, the one who's featured so much in the book.
Yes.
She and I have run Big Sur together 4 times,
Wow.
maybe 5. I don't know. We've done it several times. It's sort of a family thing. We all go out there. She was totally not ready this year. I say this with the greatest love and respect. She's totally not ready. She's getting married later this year. Boy,
Wow.
you want to blow your mind. Wait till
Congratulations,
your kids are
Ronnie.
getting
Yeah.
married. It's like,
Wow.
how did that happen? She works for SpaceX.
Uh-huh. Yep.
And,
Oh,
she-
very cool.
Oh, and she also is a coach on the anti-gravity plane,
Wow.
which is like hilarious.
That's
Yeah.
really
So
cool.
so she does that. So she and I run that one together. It's just a fun thing that we enjoy
Beautiful
doing.
race.
And oh my gosh,
Yeah.
such a beautiful marathon. And there was their first time back too, in
Right.
since pre-pandemic.
Since
And I know the
19,
people with the race organization out there, and they're just really, really good people. So my younger daughter, Allie, and my wife, Linda, did the 7-mile event, whatever it is up there, the same day. So the whole family's together. We're having this great time. We go out to the start line. And like I said, I know a bunch of people with the organization. It was great seeing them. And Ronnie and I just had fun. She was unprepared and having a blast, because we just laughed and talked, and her legs were killing her. And I was like, come on, we'll have a good time. And we just, ate strawberries and trotted in nice and slow and walked a lot for her to help her out. And it was great fun. And in the last mile, or last 2 miles, there's one last hill near the end, and they let traffic, sort of escorted traffic up in the opposite lane, going the same way we are, because they don't. It's Highway 1. If you shut down Highway 1, you shut down kind of everything there. And I was sort of feeling fun and having a good time, so I started racing cars up the hill, just for grins. And I think it actually kind of worked well, because I think everybody in that little cluster of runners, I think they were all hurting pretty badly. And I think it took their mind off the hill, because they were like, who's this idiot? And,
Right.
and it was really good fun. It was so nice. Yeah. So that was Big Sur. And I love Big Sur. Yeah. If you can get into Big Sur, not a big race, you got to get in by lottery.
Yep.
I think we may have some advantage now, because if you get a streak,
You've
going,
been doing
that
it.
matters.
Yeah.
Right. So we've done it a lot. But the great deal is, man, you fly into San Jose, go up to Yosemite for a few days,
Oh, wow.
drive down to Monterey, run the race. Bob's your uncle. Go home. That's great. Right?
I've not run it, but I've run some of the course with
Oh, man.
adrenaline.
It's
It is
something,
pretty
isn't
awesome.
it? Yeah. It's beautiful.
All right, I could talk a lot about. I got a couple questions, Tom. That I'm really. I love your reporting on CNN, and I just got some random inside baseball questions,
Ask.
that are interesting to me. Probably, I don't know. Maybe interesting to the audience or not. So, all right. So let's go back to a story you did recently, and what a crazy couple years it's been in the news. Wow. I mean, and you cover it. First tell us what you do for CNN, what you cover for CNN.
Everything.
Everything.
I've always been a general assignments person ever since I started in this business, and I like it that way, because it's I don't know who coined the phrase years ago. You try to be a jack of all trades and master of several, and it's really nice to. I just like it that way because it lets me cover whatever is interesting that day.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And not just interesting, important.
Yep.
So I like it that way. So I cover everything.
So yeah, so war, COVID. I mean, there's so much going on. One story, random story. I don't even know if you remember. I remember you were reporting on an unruly passenger on a flight who was trying to open the flight door. He had a coffee pot attacking attacking a flight attendant.
No, I think he got hit with a coffee pot.
He got hit with the coffee pot.
Yeah.
That was what it was. Yeah, he was trying to open the door. Anyway, so I think it was Jake Tapper who was interviewing you or talking to you about it. But for those 2 minutes, it is fascinating to me. I felt like you knew so much about this story. I felt like you were on the plane with them. Like, how do you know? Like, how do you and you're able to get in and out so quickly in 2 minutes and sum up the story so quickly. It's just a fascinating skill. And I'm in awe of it.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you. I will say, I've been doing this since high school. So I've been doing news reporting for more than 40 years now. And part of it is, there are two things. One, and I've never been in the least bit kind of a corporate guy. I'm barely a company guy. And that my argument with people is, I always say to people, I don't work for anybody. I work with people. That's just the way it is. And that's how I expect people to be with me too. That said, CNN is a great, great news organization. The reason I have the information I have on many stories, some of it is material that I gather myself, but a lot of it is material that our network gathers, because we have so many wonderful producers, so many wonderful correspondents, and the nature of network reporting versus local reporting, which is where I came from. In local reporting, you really have to do it almost all yourself. At a network, you have to hit this perfect synthesis of what you do yourself with what your organization has also put together. And the editorial standards here are really high.
Right.
I know people have complaints, people have what they can say with it, and it doesn't mean we don't get things wrong. Everybody does sometimes. But the editorial standards are very high. So before I put information into a piece, it has been through a lot of people. So if I don't know it myself, it's been through a lot of people and it has been checked. And even if I do know it myself, I have to send it through other people and have them check it and say, is this right? And then, Chris, I think what makes the difference ultimately is you have to say, how do you, honestly, I think this second part of it, I think, comes down to writing. I think it comes down to knowing how to tell a story in a way that I hope for people is transportive and makes them feel, as I like to describe it, you want people to forget they're watching TV or that they're watching the news. You want them to just hear the story. And if they hear it well, to understand the story. And that's a lot of, there's a saying about journalism, which I really like, which is journalism is the art of knowing what to leave out. So you're not leaving out something that's critical for understanding, but you're trying to clear away all the debris so people really understand what happened. They have a sense of the when, where, what, why, all of that, how. And they can take that in, especially if it's for TV. You want them to be able to take that in while taking care of the dog and cooking the pork chops.
Quickly. Right.
And you need to make the story simple without making it simplistic.
Right.
And that's a really important key here. And I often tell young writers here when they're trying to learn to write better, one of the things I'll say to people is read poetry. Read poetry, because poetry is often simple in that it may be 6 or 8 lines, certain poems, or 12 lines, but it's not simplistic because it is so carefully chosen and so carefully rendered. Good poetry. Man, is there a lot of bad poetry. Good poetry, classic, wonderful, great poetry, does such an extraordinary job of creating what I refer to as the espresso of language, that it just, boy, it's incredible. You can't read, I don't think you can read a lot of poetry in a day, not if it's good poetry. because those 8 lines will sink into you in a way that will just consume you for a really long period of time. And you may spend days thinking about it and sort of sussing out the meaning of it all. So anyway, the second part of that is the writing. You're trying to say, under a deadline, with all the constraints of what we know and what we don't know, with the constraint of trying to make sure you're conveying the truth, not merely facts, and certainly not opinion, but the truth. With all those constraints, now fashion these words into something that gives people meaning, and in the end lets them feel like they learned something.
Tom, tell us a little bit about how, the reporting of news affects your daily life, particularly when we're talking about, what's been happening in the world in the last 2 years, through COVID, certainly war in Ukraine right now. Does that take a toll? And I mean, I know it sounds really simple to say it this way, but does it take a toll on your running? Does it take a toll on your emotional state day to day? Like, how do you make that separation, or can you?
The second part, I think, it's interesting. I think the second part is something that hundreds of millions of Americans can attest to, because we've lived through this super strange time over the past couple of years that I think has taken a toll on a huge number of people. I think we're going to see vestiges of how this has affected people for at least a generation. Yeah. I think there are lots of normal people out there who don't really even follow the news that closely, who feel enormously beaten up by the past couple of years. And I totally understand that. I do think that it's interesting. When I was younger, covering the news, it didn't bother me much. And I would go to horrendous murder scenes and all sorts of, all the mayhem that happens in the world. And it didn't bother me as much because I was so trying to do the job well.
Right.
I kind of didn't have time to spend a lot of time thinking about how I felt about it. I just had to, the process of rendering news, especially TV news, was so cumbersome and difficult that I was just really busy with that. I thought as I got older, one of the problems would be that I felt less emotion about it because you're steeped in it so much. The opposite has been true, in that I've grown good enough at the job that I don't fear whether I'll get it done in time, or that I'll be good at it or correct at it. And that has freed my mind much more to think about the reality of what these things are. And it's very, it's hard and it's disturbing in a way. And I very consciously have times when I'm like, okay, I'm on my way home and I will not be listening to the news on the way home. Mm-hmm. Or I get home and my wife will have the TV on news, and I will say, we gotta watch, a comedy or a movie, or Grace and Frankie. What a great series that was. And but just something that changes the mood. And I'll read part of a book, or I'll put on music I really like, and that really helps kind of take you out of that space. I do wonder, I will say, I actually have wondered about what is the wear and tear of a lifetime doing this, in the same sense that, I think somebody who spent a lifetime working in an ER, or a lifetime being a police officer or a paramedic, I think, oof, that's tough on people,
Well,
so, and running, you asked about how it affects running.
Running's got to help, right?
Running helps. Running, of course, helps. Yeah. I mean, it's a huge release from all the stuff that we have to do, day in and day out. It's kind of nice to do it now. Look, I have to reaching for a tissue. I'm thinking about all the mayhem in the world. But running helps immensely, especially trail running. Yeah. Oh my gosh! At the height of COVID, oh my gosh, I would go out and hit the trail. Some of the trails I run out here, and they're not way out. I mean, DC is actually surprisingly
great trails. Absolutely. I totally agree.
I would go out and hit the trail, and I'd do 9, 12 miles, 15 miles, and I'd see 5 people.
It's amazing.
Which at the height of COVID was great. I'd knock out huge miles that way. Yeah, very much centering, very calming. Because of the schedule we keep, like this morning, I had to come in here. I had to get up at 4:30 this morning, to be in here. That's kind of hard, and I'm not going to do a morning run before that.
At 3, right?
Yeah, right. So I do a lot of time shifting, a lot of, okay, I can't run this morning, so I'll run tonight, or I can't run, or, sometimes it's things like I really can't fit in a long training run on Saturday or Sunday, but maybe Monday morning or maybe Monday evening. I've tried, as I've grown older, to not run as much in the dark. I used to run limitless miles in the dark, and frankly, for a long time without a headlight. And then finally, I think I've even recorded in the book where I finally broke down and said, okay, I think I need a headlamp. And now I tend to use a headlamp more. And I try not to run as much after dark because honestly, I think in the past few years, we've also become, in many ways, an angrier and more distracted society.
Right.
And that is not a good combination to be running along the side of the road in the dark.
Agreed.
I think it's not the best. So even when I go out after dark now, I will try once again as quickly as possible to drop away from roads, down onto the canal path or onto trails. Although at night, the lights on the trails at night, it's your headlamp, it's hard to get the right definition, and it's really easy to catch a tow and go down. And that's it's not the ideal scenario.
No, not at the age that we were at, for sure.
Oh man, I wish I were at your age.
Yeah, well, I'm getting 46, buddy. 46.
46. 46.
A lot of what you said is.
Are you expected back at the preschool any minute now? 46.
He is actually.
I am. Pick up the kids. All right, Tom. I really appreciate your time. I want to get you out of here on this. What's next, man? I mean, running, work, another book in the what is next for Tom Foreman?
I think I'm probably with our daughter's wedding this fall. I'm being a little jealous of my time to try to help get ready for that and make that nice. She's getting married out in Los Angeles, so that's going to be a whole big shindig.
Yeah, awesome.
And so that's going to take some time. That said, my wife and I are still talking about that I should probably shoot for another BQ this fall. Nice. Which I think is probably going to be Erie again because it's a really nice race. It's got the potential in early September. It's September 11th this year. Isn't this great about the running community? People just off the top of their heads are saying things like, well, the Cleveland Marathon, I'll tell you about that one. People just know.
Right.
I'm targeting Philly. I know exactly before Thanksgiving. Yeah, right. So I'm with you, man.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to probably fit that in. Well, Philly's going to be too late for BQ this year. Well, you probably carry BQ.
I have one carried over. Yeah. As I pat myself on the back here.
Yeah. So it's. I read a stat the other day that of all marathoners, people who qualify for Boston, typically you're in the top 10% of your age group to be in this. Yep. But of all people who ever marathon, I think it said that only about just over 4% ever qualify for Boston.
Wow.
Amazing.
Which that's kind of a great feeling, isn't it?
That's great.
Right?
And that's awesome, Tom.
That's a great thing. It's a good feeling. It's a lot of fun to be part of that club. And I have a friend, my friend Scott Strider. I ran into him at the race because we always check into each other at Boston. He was doing his 40th Boston.
Wow.
40 in a row. Great guy, and he's sort of beaten up now. He's had both hips replaced, and he's still grinding through it. But I ran into him around mile 13 or so, and we chatted for a moment, and then I kept going. But what's next? I think I'm working on some books. I actually have a book out right now, looking for a publisher.
Okay.
Which is it's a novel, and it's not about running, but there's a lot of running in it.
Okay.
It's featured in a sort of a. It's basically a survival novel, and it's about, in a nutshell, it's about 4 people in their late 20s, early 30s, who through a series of accidents, the way people have a series of accidents that make decisions that seem fine at the time, but in retrospect look ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And they wind up stranded in this incredibly vast and forbidding part of Australia called the Nullarbor Plain. And they're faced with the horrible choice. What do we do? Do we wait to be rescued in a land where there's very little reason to believe anyone's ever going to come here? Or do we try to go overland to get out? Which is wisdom. History tells you don't.
Right.
But this becomes the struggle. And really what that book is about in many ways is, what do you believe in? Do you believe in yourself? Do you believe in science? Do you believe in history? Do you believe in the team? Do you believe in God? Do you believe in fate? Do you believe in chance? What is it that leads you, especially when you're making that decision, knowing that everything in your life is waiting? It depends on you making the right decision. So that book is out there right now. I'm working on, as I said, a couple of other books, which I say working on them. It's a little bit like when you're pulling up a new running plan, but you haven't started the cycle yet. I'm working on it. So I'm sort of working on these other things, and I'm going to be here at CNN at least for several more years, and beyond that, trying to do, I guess, my part for a lot of people who, family and friends and colleagues and just people who I know, acquaintances who have struggled through the past couple of years, like we all have. Because I think if people don't do that, I don't know where we're going to be, because I think people really have to try to help each other now, because this has been a trying time.
Very.
And my social media now contains, as a practical matter, no criticism of anything. I'm like, we got too much criticism of everything. It's like people.
Yeah, no, you're uplifting.
Just encourage people. So it's I try to do that. So that's what's next for me, and my wife and I might get a burrito this evening. I'm looking forward to that.
So we did get the food talking.
Short-term and long-term plan. Got it.
Yeah, what's the best food you ever had on a long run? Best food.
Man. I ran the JFK 50 miler, and finally it was that turkey sandwich. It was the best turkey sandwich I've ever had.
It's pretty great, isn't it?
Yeah.
What about you, Julie?
I've never gone longer than 20, so a good.
That's long enough.
That's all I've ever gotten out there. So just a good.
You could put a ham under your arm and pull off pieces while you run that 20. I think it's probably the grilled cheese that I've had during Stone Mill. I did my 5th Stone Mill this past fall, which was really great. And the grilled cheese is great, and the soup is great. The soup with some noodles in it. I saw a guy. We got to go, I guess. But there was a guy some years ago running Stone Mill. We had 13 miles left, and I'd watched. I was having a bad race. This last year was really kind of. I had a blast. It was beautiful. The sun went down. It got dark. The moon came up. I ran into a part of the woods. These owls were like lighting up the sky above me, and I was like, "This is incredible." Great. But this one year, this guy at 13 miles, this guy had been watching him in front of me, because I wasn't having a great race, but I was kind of watching him to see how he was doing. I thought, he looks like he's doing okay. We went into this aid station with about 13 miles left, and he sat down.
Oof.
Which is, right.
That's the worst thing.
It's too hard to get back up.
Get behind me, devil.
Yeah.
He sat down in this chair, and I saw the aid station folks. I was drinking some soup real quick. And I saw one of them say to another one, this woman says to this other woman, "Go check on that guy." And she walks over and she says, "How are you doing?" And he says in this voice that came from 1,000 miles away, he says, "Well, it just feels so nice to sit down." And I thought, you are
His race is
pal.
over.
You're done.
It's over. Yep. No way. Guy's not getting back up.
So that too, Chris, may be in my future.
No way.
All right, that's Tom Foreman. He is an author. The book that is out there, and if you're a publisher, contact Tom. Let's get this other book out there. The book that is out there, My Year Running Dangerously. He's a CNN correspondent. He's also a very, very qualified multiple-time Boston qualified marathoner.
There it is.
There you go. Unicorn.
Yeah, there he is. And he's going to enjoy a burrito tonight.
You bet.
All right. Tom, awesome stuff. Let's not make it so long until the next time you join us, man.
Hey,
Thank you for
call
your
me
time.
anytime. I'm around.
Thank you for your time. You were fantastic.
You guys are fun. Good talking.
Fun.
Pace the Nation is brought to you by Pacers Running Stores. Pacers has 6 stores in Northern Virginia and DC. For the best running footwear, apparel, and gear, just stop by or schedule a virtual fitting with the best running experts in the business. Pacers Running exists to help as many people as possible through running. For every run, it's Pacers Running.
All right, welcome back to the program, and thanks again to Tom Foreman, CNN correspondent for joining us today on Pace the Nation. Julie, he was great. He was helping me with my running. He was kind of coaching me on how to podcast, how to storytell on the podcast. Man, I need this guy to like be my
Is
life
that
coach.
what you got from the interview? I
Yeah,
thought
yeah,
we
no.
were having a nice conversation. I didn't know it was all directed towards
All about
coaching
me. I
you.
was, well, you know what? I was taking little tidbits, little snippets that I think could help me in my life. Nothing
Well,
wrong with
that's
that.
because I slipped him a 20 beforehand to talk to him about calming down when your children are really young with your own
Yeah,
running.
that was
That
really
was
good.
amazing. That was
amazing.
brilliant.
Yeah,
Obviously,
I
I'm
know.
kidding.
I
But
mean, literally, I was thinking today, like, I'm not going to get a run in. And he said it. He's like, your kids aren't going to necessarily let you run when you think you're going to run, and that's okay. And he didn't run, and he didn't regret it. And, you know, so maybe there's different stages. So
he said two things. He said, number one, your children are going to need you when they need you, not when you want them to
right.
need you. And the second thing
Yep.
was you have to remember that there's more than one thing that you love during this time of your
Yeah.
life and that you have to
Yeah.
prioritize those things. So I thought that was really, really, really good advice. And I could see the
Very
wheels
good.
turning for you because you're
Yep.
like, my wife says that to me all the time, but I don't ever really listen to her. It just kind of goes in one ear out the other. Like, you know, there's like too much noise coming from her at any given moment. But you're like, wait a minute, I've heard this before.
I have.
I've
All
heard
right.
this before.
It just takes someone else telling me. So thank you, Tom. All right. So, all right, we got to get, it was great interview with Tom. I know we got to get going, but I wanted to share this quick story, very quick story. We talked about you being in Boston, and you were in Boston while I flew the kids to vacation in Key Largo. So we flew to Miami with our nanny, Andrea. So Andrea, me, 3 kids. You were in Boston. You were really kind of nervous about us taking that flight from DCA to Miami. Yes?
I
No?
shouldn't be because it's all lined up. It's all
Yeah, it was all
there.
lined
I
up.
left a
Yep.
lot of lists
You
of
did.
things. I talked
You
about what
packed
time
us
you
all.
talked
I
about what
mean,
time you needed to
yeah.
leave the house, the things that you needed for the airport, how long it was going to take, talking
Yep.
about the ride you're going to have.
Yep. So I thought we were good to go. And we were, because you had set us up very nicely. But there's always curveballs with 3 kids under
Oh,
6.
please don't blame them. This has
I know,
nothing
no,
to
no.
do with them.
No, it has nothing to do with them. You're right. No, I'm not blaming them. I'm just saying there's curveballs. I'm not blaming
There's
them. So,
curveballs, but
yeah.
it had nothing to do with
Yeah.
them.
So we leave 2.5 hours early to get to the airport. Me, our nanny, 3 kids. My mom was flying in that same day, so I was going to leave the car at the airport and just park really close by so she could pick up the car and take it home.
Which, by the
So
way, that was not part of the plan
that was not part of the plan.
you and I had discussed, right?
But I pivoted and I thought this is a great way to get the car home, because how do you get 3 car seats to the airport? Do you park the car for 8 days? It was a conundrum. So I decided my mom would take the car home. We start driving there, and we realized we'd forgotten the breast milk. So we get to the airport. We call an Uber to Uber the breast milk over. Fortunately, we had our housekeeper was able to put the breast milk in the car. So that wasn't too bad of a setback. I said, all right, you know what? You know, there was going to be something that's going to happen. We made it through. We're good. So Uber driver shows up with the bag of breast milk. I wonder if he's ever done that before. Probably not. So we get that, and then we check our bags outside. And I'm feeling good 2 hours before. So I leave the kids with Andrea, and I said, bags are packed. We got our tickets. We're ready to go. I just got to go park the car, and I'll run back in, and we'll go to the gate. What I didn't realize, it was some sort of spring break happening.
Some sort of spring break, sort of random event.
Yeah. So
that never
every
happens.
every single parking lot was full that was close by. I had to go off the DCA property to park, take a shuttle back in. So now I'm 30 to 40 minutes behind. Whew. So now I'm getting a little stressed. You're calling me. You're like, how things going? I'm like, thumbs up emoji, or you're texting me, thumbs up emoji. We get back to the gate, to the airport, off the shuttle. We race the kids to the gate through security. Not too bad, but TSA had to check again the milk for the baby. So that took about 30 more minutes. So I take the two older kids. I said, Andrea, I'm going to the gate. So I take the two older kids to the gate, and once she's done at TSA, she's going to meet us there. We get there 17 minutes before the flight's taken off. Gate closes. I said, oh, no. I can't miss this flight. I immediately think, what is Julie going to think if I miss this flight? She's probably in Boston working hard, and she's trying not to worry about us. But I know in the back of your mind, you're worrying about every single step of the way that it's whatever we're doing back in DC. So I go to the person at the gate, and I've got an elevated level of anxiety, I'd say. I said, I can't miss that flight. She said, the gate's closed. There's nothing we can do. We'll put you on another flight, knowing that there was no more flights. So the idea of having to take 3 kids back home to fly out the next day and do this whole thing over again was pretty overwhelming. So I did maybe my best sales job in my life. I should write a book on how to close a deal in sales. So I told her, listen, my car seats are checked in that flight. I have to get on that plane. And she did some things behind the screen and called some people and typed away. And she said, all right, I'm going to sneak you on. Don't say anything. Don't make a big scene about it. And they let us on the flight. And
I think you're not telling the whole part about like the angry mob that also showed up. That
there was
thought
an
that
angry
there
mob
was,
that's why she said, listen, I
don't say anything.
don't say
Yeah.
anything, because there are 15 other people who also missed the flight.
Yeah.
But the 15 other people.
Which meanwhile, the flight keeps getting delayed. So the
Delayed,
airplane's
So
just sitting there.
There is
And part
nothing
of
more
your
frustrating in the
argument-
world than
Yeah.
a plane sitting there that you see,
Yeah.
and you're like, just let me on the flight, please.
Well, they also closed the gate several minutes before. It's 15 minutes is
Yes,
the moment
standard.
that they close,
Yep.
and they closed it early.
Yep. So it was.
I never heard you that angry. I don't. That
yeah.
might be the most angry I've ever heard you. It was not a moment for me to say, "How did this happen?"
Yeah. No. No. This was.
Tell me how
I needed
you
support.
got here.
I
Tell
needed
me
support.
how you got to the gate 17 minutes
Yeah.
ahead of departure.
Right.
After we had gone through the entire plan and you
Yeah.
arrived 2.5 hours.
No, it wasn't time for that.
Tell me how that happened.
No, it wasn't time.
We
for
talked
that.
about it a couple days later after you.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in typical, again, I say this a lot on the show. Typical Chris Farley fashion, right? I think our listeners are probably starting to understand what typical Chris Farley typical Chris Farley fashion is, that you somehow figured out how to get on that airplane. And then once you were on the plane, because you guys now had seats all over the place because they had reassigned everybody, you get the entire plane
to rearrange
move,
themselves.
reorganize, and you send me a picture of you guys all sitting next to each other about ready to take off. And
I'm charming. What can I say? I'm charming.
It was lunchtime. Okay. It was like an 11:55 flight. I went straight to the bar. Because you called me and said we missed a flight. I thought you were kidding.
Yeah.
You weren't kidding.
No.
I went straight to the bar. I was like, I can't.
You can't do this. Yeah.
I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can go there on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if they're going to be there. Maybe I'm flying back to DC. Who knows? Vacation's ruined. So I'm 2 beers deep, and then you call me and say we made the flight.
Here we are on the flight. Thumbs up emoji.
I never drink at lunch. This was 2 full days of stress for me, worrying about you guys.
It is
and I was
stressful.
like, I can't do my job.
Stressful.
Yeah.
Stressful.
I can't ever leave you again. It just isn't going to work.
Which makes that podcast that you did with Dana, the More Than Running podcast, even more impressive that it was that good. We will tweet out a link to that podcast.
I'm not going to pat myself on the back for that one, but thank you.
Yes. All right. But back to this podcast. Thank you to our friend Tom Foreman for joining us. He is CNN correspondent. He's a author. He's a runner. Just ran Big Sur and Boston. Thanks for the stories, Tom. Great to have you on Pace the Nation. All right, Julie, we did it again. Another podcast in the books, episode 272. Thanks to Chris behind the scenes. Thanks to you, the listener. All right, for Julie, I'm Chris. This is Pace the Nation. We'll see you next time.